Today we're diving into the top 5 most valuable Washington quarters in bad condition that collectors will pay good money for. Let's uncover their hidden worth. First up, the 1966 Washington quarter dollar holds a unique place in American coinage history. While at first glance it may appear to be just another mid-century coin, this quarter is a direct product of a dramatic shift in the U.S. monetary system. To understand its true significance, we must look back to the events leading up to its creation. In the early 1960s, the United States experienced a severe coin shortage. This shortage was largely due to the rising price of silver, which caused people to hoard coins that were made of the precious metal. By 1964, the U.S. Mint recognized that the intrinsic value of silver in dimes, quarters, and half dollars was rapidly approaching or even exceeding the face value of the coins themselves. As a result, people were pulling them out of circulation in droves, either to melt them down or save them in hopes of future profit. To counter this growing crisis, the Coinage Act of 1965 was passed. This act removed silver from the composition of dimes and quarters entirely, replacing it with a copper-nickel-clad composition. While half dollars continued to contain some silver until 1970, quarters, including the 1966 issue, were now made of an inner core of pure copper and an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This new composition proved cost-effective, corrosion-resistant, and harder to hoard since it lacked any precious metal content. The 1966 Washington quarter was minted during a time when the U.S. Mint was also implementing measures to stabilize the coin supply. For example, to discourage collectors from removing coins from circulation during this transitional period, no mint marks were placed on quarters from 1965 to 1967. This means that regardless of whether a 1966 quarter was struck at the Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco Mint, it carries no identifying mint mark. This was an unusual break from tradition and adds to the historical curiosity of coins from these years. The obverse of the 1966 quarter features the classic design of George Washington, originally created by John Flanagan in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of Washington's birth. On the obverse, we see the familiar bust of the first president facing left, with the word "Liberty" above his head, the phrase "In God We Trust" to the left, and the date 1966 below. On the reverse, the design remains unchanged. From earlier issues, a heraldic eagle with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows, and below the eagle, 2 olive branches that form a semicircle. The inscriptions "United States of America" and "quarter dollar" arc along the rim, with a pluribus unum centered above the eagle's head. Now, when it comes to value, the 1966 Washington quarter is often considered a common coin. Millions were minted, and it's still widely found in circulation. In fact, more than 821 million quarters were produced in 1966, a staggering number that ensures they remain plentiful even today. However, condition makes all the difference. In typical circulated condition, a 1966 quarter is worth its face value of 25 cents. But when a coin is in better shape, such as fine or very fine condition, collectors may pay a slight premium. Next up, the 1968 Washington quarter dollar is more than just a piece of pocket change. It's part of a larger story in American coinage that began in the mid-1960s. The U.S. Mint, facing a national coin shortage and rising silver prices, had already removed silver from dimes and quarters in 1965. By the time the 1968 quarter was minted, the transition to copper-nickel-clad coins was well underway, and the U.S. coinage system was entering a new, modern era. Before 1965, quarters were made from 90% silver. But due to the increasing value of silver and widespread hoarding, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, eliminating silver from circulating quarters altogether. The new clad quarters featured a copper core and outer layers made from a copper-nickel alloy. This made them more cost-effective and allowed the mint to produce larger quantities without worrying about the melting value of the metal. By 1968, this copper-nickel composition was standard. The 1968 quarter retained the familiar design by sculptor John Flanagan, which had first appeared on the Washington quarter in 1932. The obverse features a profile of George Washington facing left with the word Liberty above, the motto, "In God We Trust," to the left, and the date 1968 at the bottom. The reverse shows a heraldic eagle perched on a bundle of arrows, framed by two olive branches with the inscriptions United States of America and $quarter along the outer edge, and E pluribus unum just above the eagle's head. One important note about the 1968 quarter is the return of mint marks. From 1965 to 1967, mint marks were removed from coins to discourage hoarding by collectors during the coin shortage. In 1968, the mint began including mint marks again. Quarters from this year were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which placed no mint mark, the Denver Mint with a D mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint with an S mint mark, which was used only for proof coins. The Denver Mint produced over 101 million Washington quarters in 1968. The Philadelphia Mint added another 220 million. That means the total mintage was high, making this a common coin overall. San Francisco, however, produced around 3 million proof coins, which were intended only for collectors and not for general circulation. Now, when it comes to value, a 1968 Washington quarter in bad or heavily circulated condition, one that has significant wear, surface scratches, discoloration, or even partial detail loss, is not considered rare or especially valuable. Most worn examples are still worth their face value of 25 cents. You'll frequently find 1968 quarters with smoothed-out rims, flattened hair detail on Washington's bust, or almost featureless eagle feathers on the reverse. These kinds of bad condition quarters are extremely common, and because so many were made, the numismatic value in that state remains very low. However, there are always exceptions when it comes to errors and special varieties. For example, a few 1968 quarters have been found with off-center strikes or die breaks, which can make them worth more even if the coin is in poor condition. Also, collectors sometimes pay a premium for coins with full strike details or particularly attractive toning, but these usually need to be in at least average to above average condition. Next up, the 1995 D Washington quarter dollar is a familiar coin to many Americans, often passed through hands countless times without a second thought. But beneath its everyday appearance lies an interesting backstory tied to U.S. coin production, economic strategy, and even the quirks of coin aging and toning. When we come across a 1995 D quarter that has turned a brown or coppery color, it sparks a common question. Is it rare? And is it worth anything more than face value? To begin with the basics, the 1995 D quarter was minted at the Denver Mint, as indicated by the D mint mark found on the obverse of the coin, just to the right of Washington's ponytail. That year, the Denver Mint produced over 1.1 billion Washington quarters. Yes, over 1 billion. It was part of the standard mintage practice of the time, fulfilling the daily needs of commerce throughout the United States. This means the coin, itself in standard condition, is extremely common. The obverse design features the familiar portrait of George Washington, originally sculpted by John Flanagan in 1932 to honor Washington's 200th birthday. The inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust flank the bust, and the date 1995 appears below. On the reverse, the coin displays a heraldic eagle perched on a bundle of arrows, with olive branches below, representing strength and peace. This classic design remained unchanged on circulating quarters until the state quarters program began in 1999. By 1995, quarters were no longer made with silver, as silver had been removed from circulating quarters back in 1965 due to rising metal prices and coin hoarding. Instead, The 1995 D quarter, like others from that period, was struck from a copper-nickel-clad composition, an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This composition is strong, cost-effective, and resistant to corrosion, but over time it can still change in appearance. Now, let's talk about the brown coloration. Many people find 1995 D quarters that appear darker, more brownish, or copper-colored than usual and wonder if this is some rare minting error. In almost all cases, it's not. What you're seeing is natural environmental toning or oxidation, often caused by exposure to air, moisture, heat, or certain chemicals. When coins are left in the ground, in water, or in reactive containers, their surfaces can change color dramatically over time. A brown-toned quarter typically indicates long-term exposure to oxygen or elements like sulfur, which causes the coin's metal to oxidize and discolor. This discoloration does not usually increase the coin's value. In fact, for most collectors, a brown or damaged coin is worth less than a clean, well-preserved example. Unless the color pattern is exceptionally vibrant or forms an unusual and attractive toning, sometimes referred to as rainbow toning, a brown quarter from 1995 is generally still considered a circulated common coin with a value of just 25 cents. However, condition does matter. A standard 1995 D Washington quarter in average circulated condition is worth only its face value. If the same coin is in uncirculated condition, meaning it has no wear and maintains its original mint luster, it might sell for around $1 to $3, depending on the quality and the buyer. Higher grade examples, graded MS-65 or better by a professional service, can sell for $5 to $10 or more. But again, for a brown-toned, worn quarter, collectors typically aren't willing to pay a premium, unless it has a unique error or rarity. The 1982 D Washington quarter dollar might look like any ordinary piece of spare change, but it actually carries a deeper story, one that reflects the economic challenges and changes in U.S. coinage during the early 1980s. Even when found in bad or heavily worn condition, this coin can offer insight into a unique era in American minting history. Let's take a closer look at the coin's background, why some 1982 quarters are different, and what a 1982 D Washington quarter is worth today, especially if yours is in poor condition. To begin, the Washington quarter design used in 1982 had already been in use for 50 years. Sculptor John Flanagan's portrait of George Washington had first appeared on the quarter in 1932, to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. The design was simple but elegant. Washington faces left on the obverse with the word liberty above, in God we trust to the left, and the date 1982 just beneath the bust. The reverse features a heraldic eagle clutching a bundle of arrows, with olive branches below, symbolizing both military strength and peace. This design would remain on quarters until the launch of the 50 state quarters program in 1999. The 1982 D quarter was struck at the Denver Mint, as indicated by the small D mint mark to the right of Washington's ponytail. That year, Denver produced about 480 million quarters, a relatively high mintage, which makes the 1982 D a common coin in general circulation. But what makes this year stand out isn't just the design or the quantity, it's the condition in which most of these coins are found today, and why that condition matters. The early 1980s were marked by rising inflation and budget cuts in many federal programs, and that included the U.S. Mint. In 1982, the Mint faced significant economic pressure. To save money, the Mint drastically cut back on the production of uncirculated mint sets, meaning there were no official uncirculated coin sets produced for the public that year. As a result, collectors had far fewer pristine 1982 quarters available to preserve in high-grade condition. Most of the 1982 D quarters that survived did so through regular circulation, meaning they were used in vending machines, spent on toll roads, and jingled in pockets for years. Because of this lack of uncirculated sets, even standard 1982 D quarters, in nice condition are harder to find, and those in mint state, MS65 or higher, can fetch respectable prices from collectors. But for a quarter in bad condition, with heavy wear, scratches, loss of detail, or discoloration, the value remains very low. In such worn-down states, a 1982 D quarter is typically worth just its face value of 25 cents. These heavily circulated coins are everywhere, and unless there's something very unusual about yours, it's not considered rare or collectible. That said, if your 1982 D quarter has severe surface wear, dark coloration, or edge damage, it's likely been exposed to decades of handling or environmental stress. These are often referred to as bad condition or low-grade coins. In collector terms, this would be graded anywhere from good, G4, down to poor, P1. In those grades, dealers and collectors have little interest unless the coin has an error. Speaking of errors, the 1982 D quarter does have one noteworthy variety that excites collectors: the 1982 D no mint mark, or weak D. While the vast majority of 1982 D quarters clearly show the D mint mark, there are rare cases where the mint mark was either accidentally omitted or was so weakly struck that it appears almost invisible. These are incredibly rare and can be valuable, especially in better condition. But they're not typically found in heavily worn coins. If you suspect your coin has an unusual or missing mint mark, it's worth having it checked by a coin expert or a professional grading service. Another area to pay attention to is whether your 1982 D quarter was mistakenly struck on a different planchet, such as a dime or foreign coin blank. These rare mint errors do exist and can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. But again, in bad condition, it can be hard to identify such errors without the help of specialized tools or testing. Next up, the 1974 Washington quarter dollar is one of those coins that you're likely to find in your pocket change even today. At first glance, it might not seem like anything special, just another quarter among millions. But when you take a closer look at its history, minting, and the subtle nuances of its condition, it becomes more than just pocket change. Especially when found in fine condition, the 1974 quarter has its own story worth sharing. Let's begin with the basics. The 1974 quarter features the iconic portrait of George Washington on the obverse, a design created by sculptor John Flanagan, and first used in 1932 to mark the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. The word liberty is prominently displayed above his head, with "In God We Trust" to the left, and the date 1974 at the bottom. The reverse design features a majestic heraldic eagle with outstretched wings, clutching a bundle of arrows with olive branches beneath, symbolizing both strength and peace. The coin is made from a copper-nickel-clad composition, which had been adopted for all regular circulating quarters starting in 1965. Replacing the 90% silver coins previously issued. This clad composition consists of an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a core of pure copper. This change was due to the rising cost of silver in the 1960s, which made it too expensive to use in everyday coinage. By 1974, the clad coin had become the standard, and the U.S. Mint was producing them in large numbers to meet the needs of the growing economy. The Philadelphia Mint, which struck the 1974 quarter, did not use a mint mark for coins struck at its facility at that time. So if your 1974 quarter has no mint mark, it was made in Philadelphia. In total, over 801 million quarters were struck at the Philadelphia Mint that year. Additionally, the Denver Mint, which used a D mint mark, produced about 353 million more. These numbers confirm that the 1974 quarter is far from rare in general terms. However, the story becomes more interesting when you consider coin condition and collector demand. When we talk about a coin being in fine condition, we refer to its level of detail and wear. In numismatics, fine generally means the coin has moderate to heavy wear, but most major details are still visible. Washington's hair might be worn smooth in places, but his facial features are clear, and the eagle on the reverse still shows distinct feathers and claws. A 1974 quarter in fine condition is above average for circulation, especially considering the nearly 50 years it has likely been in use. In terms of market value, a 1974 Washington quarter in fine condition typically holds a value of 25 cents to about 35 cents, depending on demand and the buyer. It's not rare enough to attract a premium from most collectors, but its slightly above-average preservation means it might be a nice filler piece for someone assembling a year-by-year coin set. Unless the coin is in mint state, meaning it was never circulated and still has its original shine, there's usually no significant increase in value. In mint state grades like MS-65 or better, a 1974 quarter can sell for $5 to $10, especially if the surfaces are clean and the strike is sharp. What makes the 1974 quarter particularly interesting to collectors and history buffs is that it represents the final full year before one of the most unique coin-related events in U.S. history, the bicentennial quarter. In 1975 and 1976, the U.S. Mint struck quarters bearing the dual date 1776-1976, with a special reverse design celebrating America's 200th birthday. Because of that, the 1974 quarter is seen by some collectors as the last regular issue before the special designs took over for 2 years.